Hey, you want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money. All in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take your conversations with fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. Best of all, it's totally free with no catch. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today. Hey gang, welcome back to another week of Ranching Reboot. This episode sponsored by our generous patrons over on patreon.com/Red Hills Rancher. Next episode, one of them could be you. Check the link in the show notes page to patreon.com. If none of the options on Patreon appeal to you, there's some other links on my link tree to Venmo and PayPal where you can make one-time donations. The link to my link tree is also in the show notes. Been getting a lot of questions lately about other enterprises on the ranch and other things that you can do to concessionize things on the ranch. And this kind of ties in with a larger conversation of succession. So today I've got something a little bit special for you, kind of a two-part show. So make sure you stick around toward the end. We're going to talk about the history of Blackleg Ranch and some of the ways that the Doan family has found to get the younger generation interested to come back to the ranch and be a part of the ranching family and ranching community. To kick this off right, we've got the patriarch of the Doan family and CEO of Blackleg Ranch, Jerry Doan, with us today to give us a history and to talk about Blackleg Ranch. So Jerry Doan, welcome to Ranching Reboot.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
Great to finally get you here. Getting a little bit of a late start, but that's okay. So for our listeners, I've known Jerry now for, probably 5 or 6 years from the conference circuit. I think the first time I met you, I don't even want to say because I'll probably screw it up, but we've done Regenerate. We've been at Regenerate together. We've been at Soil Health U together. We've been at SRM together and at several places. And recently you had me up to North Dakota to speak at the North Dakota Grazing Land Coalition Succession Planning Workshop. And man, you guys really put on a fantastic event up there. Like, your Grazing Land Coalition, you guys have got it going on. So, you know, I kind of wanted to do this in person while I was there. And honestly, I think the meal that we shared and the friendship that we had up there was a lot better. And I'm more than happy to have you on the show today. So welcome, Jerry.
Well, thanks. Yeah, we had a good time. We really appreciate you coming to North Dakota. The feedback's been tremendous on you and the whole event. We just did a wrap up with Starry and Bank, the Grazing Coalition, on Zoom this morning, and just super positive response from lots of folks signed up with Freedom Financial to take their operation further. I think they had 66 people out of that group sign up. It's like 85% or more that signed up. I mean, that's huge. That's what we wanted. We wanted to present something and then let them take it further, and I guess they did. So it's great.
Hopefully I've got an episode coming up with the Freedom Financial folks so we can learn some more about that, and I can bring some of that knowledge that I got up in North Dakota and bring that back. Yeah. So
good.
Tell us about Blackleg Ranch. Where are you at?
Well, I can give you a tad of history to start out with. I guess, my great grandfather was a Canadian citizen, and in 1880 he came out of, his father had died, and him and his mother came down to the United States, ended up in Kansas, down in your neck of the woods. And we're not sure, we don't know a lot about that story, but then we know he ended up back in Dakota, what was still Dakota Territory, and he shows up in some newspaper articles and things, and actually homesteaded in southern Burleigh County. We're just on the east side of the Missouri River, and it was a little bit of a wild time back then, I guess. There was still Indian things going on, and I always say they lived in a sod house. We've got an actual picture of the sod house, and as crazy as we and challenging as we think the world is today, I don't know if it still compares to trying to stay warm and put food on the table in the middle of the northern plains. So.
Right.
They'd probably laugh at us and our first world problems right now.
Yeah, exactly. But so then he had a daughter that was sickly, had lung problems, and they moved to California. My grandfather took over, and he bought land for $1 an acre when people said you're an idiot. It's way too high. It'll never work. And he did struggle. He took the fence down on 2/4 twice because he thought he was going to lose it, and then put it back up again, and worked off the ranch doing different things to try to make ends meet. But he gave us a foundation to carry on with, and then it went to my dad, who was maybe more of the caretaker of that generation. They'd went through the tough times in the 30s. They were afraid to step out a little bit, rightfully so. They saw how tough it was in the Depression, and then I come along, fresh out of college, think I got all the answers, and went through the 80s, and dang lucky I'm still here because things were going haywire. And I tell the story, a half dozen people I really admired because they had a row of equipment out in front of the shop and all this neat stuff. And there's not one of those guys I'm thinking about are still in business. The 80s got them.
Wow.
And we watched our equity eroding, and I thought, my God, if I'm the generation that loses this, I won't be able to handle it. I'll be hanging by a tree somewhere. And then I went through Savory's school here, holistic management, and Savory's a little different individual. Jay Fear always tells the story. Savory's like Jesus. If you ask him a question, he answers with another question.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth to that.
Or
And I struggled with it a bit. I was, the way we're taught, Brian, in higher education, we're taught in black and white. You and I have had this discussion, and I think we do a bit of a disservice. And I was the same way. Just give me the answer and I'll go apply it and live happily ever after. Well, we all know holistic management and regenerative ag is nothing like that. It's all gray, and life is like that. It's not black and white, it's gray. And once we get our mindset straight on that, we've got a lot more opportunity to be successful. And I went home from that, started to divide a couple of big pastures into some smaller ones, but still was kind of confused, went back through holistic management again. And then it started to kind of all click, and I guess the rest is history. Not that I have all the answers, it's a constant learning curve, but we've seen our profitability really change here. And we work at our two major holistic goals are bringing profitability back and improve our quality of life. And I mean, our quality of life isn't perfect every day, but at least we work at that. Try to make it fun again. Most people in agriculture, I shouldn't say most, but a lot I know, they don't have fun. They work their butt off and kind of complain about it, but they do the same thing over and over. It's very traditional, and there's nothing on this place that's traditional anymore. And so we try to have fun with it. We have our challenges. We are a family. My wife, Renee, and I think we're still in control, but our three boys aren't, they're not sure we are, and they're trying to make sure we're not. And, and I'm really proud to have three boys that came back to our ranch. They all went to college across the country, and my daughter, she's not directly involved, but helps some. And they all came back to North Dakota and wanted to be involved in agriculture and be involved in this ranch. That's really exciting, but much as we learned in the succession school. And we know that family dynamics are a challenge. And we're really working at that hard to make sure that we protect this legacy and hopefully can turn it over to the next generation.
Great stuff. Great stuff. So tell me about the ranch. Like, how big is it? And, what kind of critters are you growing on that place?
Well, it's a pretty good sized place. It's 20,000 acres, and we run a lot of cattle and buffalo. And, we're very intensive managed on our grassland, and we've seen uh, huge improvement in that. When I was a kid, it was season-long grazing, and I'm not trying to be critical of those generations. They did what they thought was right, but we're just like I said on the east side of the Missouri River, and we've got some real sandy, hilly land, and that was all bare soil. Bare. We used to dirt bike in it. It was a lot of fun, and there wasn't anything. And what grass was there was blue grama grass, a lot of short. The diversity was very narrow. And when we went in there with a lot of cattle, short duration, high animal impact, and then got them out, and then Mother Nature's good enough to give you a little moisture. Man, we've got big blue stem just climbed those slopes, and there was no big blue stem that I could find left, and yet it came from the seed bed. I always tell the story. Groups will come here and say, "Well, how did you get that big blue stem?" I said, "Well, we took a big John Deere air seeder and went out there in the middle of those hills," and then laugh because it's not true. But the diversity came back, and I'm proud of that because those hills, yeah, there's still a bare spot here and there, but it used to be all bare, and now it's covered. And so all that management and those cattle, higher, and it's what the buffalo did in the northern plains. It's what the buffalo did. If you read Lewis and Clark's journals, they tell the story of the grasslands were abundant and saddle high. Why was that? It was those massive herds coming through, stimulating the ground, eating the grass, not very selective, and then but not coming back for a year or two or three. And you had that long rest and recovery, and you had these abundant grasslands. And so then we come along and we season long graze, and we constant overgrazing, undergrazing, the diversity narrows, and you don't notice that if you're there every day looking at it, but leave for 3 or 4 years and come back and then go, wow, this is going wrong, so.
And you hit on something there that, a lot of us kind of independently arrived at. Bunch them up, high density, very short duration for a graze, but a long rest period. So what does, and if you don't want to necessarily get into specific numbers of pounds per acre or days of rest, that's okay. But what are we talking? Are we talking half a grazing season, a full year, half a grazing season of rest?
Well, yeah, I mean, and in our situation up here in the Northern Plains, I like once over. For the benefit of the land, once over is the best. But I'll qualify that because we've learned if you're after performance, then you're going to have to modify that. In your country where you have a longer growing season, you can do things a little different than we can. But what I've learned is, okay, if we're in a once over system and we get into August, you've got a lot of material out there, a lot of forage, but it's pretty mature and the quality's dropping off. And what I was struggling with when we were grazing yearlings or anything that you want to, put more gain on, they're dropping off on you. So then and we use the nutritional balancer program out of Texas to test this. And so then we went to something that had maybe 75 days rest on, and you had more green, lush material in it. And we were able to kick heifers that we tested up a whole pound a day. And that was huge. And it was finally, I said, wow, then we can, because I was always struggling. Guys would compare between intensive grazing and season long. Well, season long, where they can select, they're always going to do a little better, if you don't care about what you're doing to the land. And if you're renting the land like these guys were, what do they care? It's not their deal,
Right.
And I was trying to prove that we could do these systems and keep the performance up. And if you're after that performance, that's what we have to do. So, but even then, we can't go, you get into Missouri or some of those areas where they can maybe rotate in 40 days or 45. We can't do that, but we can, and you don't want to do it on all of them in 75, but generally I do it once a year, and they're going to have 300 because they're probably only going to be in there 3 or 4 days, so they're going to have 300 and what's that, 350 or 360 days of rest, and half
Right.
of that's winter time, of course, but then we'll take some pastures if we're looking like particularly with our heifers and those sorts of things and go into something that's 60, 75 days rest, something like that. But don't do that on the same ones every year. Mix it up and it works really well. So if that helps you.
Oh, and I found a lot of those same things out too, like and mixing it up, not applying the same grazing pressure to the same paddock year after year after year, especially at the same time of year. Shift that, try to shift that to a different season so you can, encourage a different variety of plants. I've noticed big changes since I started doing that, in the plant community, just always doing something a little bit different with the grazing pressure and with the timing of.
Yeah, shake it up a little.
Yeah, for sure. So how many I guess I kind of want to ask, like, how many paddocks do you guys have, and like how often are you really moving your stock?
Well, we've got like 100 pastures now, pastures, paddocks. Depends on who you're talking to, what term makes them feel good.
Right. Permanently fenced though.
Yeah. And and then we're moving every 1 to 5, 6, 7 days. We've got a couple pastures still, 250 acres or so. Average is more around 80 or so. We're trying to me, and I always qualify this with people because I had the same question. Somebody was interviewing me the other day. They put guys like you or me or others on the so-called pedestal, and you've got to graze like they do. If you're going to be good, you got to be like they are. And I'm like, that really has nothing to do with it. I mean, find what works for you. And if moving once a month is doing what fits your goals and you're improving the rangeland and you like what it's doing, then be happy.
Yeah.
And it's kind of where I started out at. And then I think I can do a little better here, divide again, divide again, divide again. Now, I'm not a mob grazer. I've been on places like that are moving cattle every hour or two, and I'm impressed with what it does. I don't want to spend my life in the pasture, and I'm not saying you can't do that or hire somebody or whatever. And we're way further now than I ever thought I would be, but it's a process. And if you're not ready, you can't start out with season-long grazing and go to mob grazing and think that's a great deal because it'll put you upside down. You got to take this, I think, in baby steps. Now we can go faster and try to get there quicker, but if you take it a bit slow, you're going to feel way better about where you've been and how you're getting there and where you're at. But I truly believe you find what works for you and then be happy with it, and don't, who cares what Brian Alexander, Jerry Doan, or anybody else is doing? Don't worry about that. If your profitability is going where you want, your quality of life's going where you want, you're improving in the rangeland's going where you want, and then watch it over time. If you decide, hey, I think I can do better, then go for it.
I agree with that. And I think a lot of the so-called gurus, and I don't think I'd put myself in that group. Thank you. I think a lot of the so-called gurus, I'm not saying they aren't experts, but maybe they aren't quite as expert outside of their zip code.
Right.
Just because something works in, South Florida doesn't mean it's going to work in Georgia. Just because something works here in Kansas doesn't mean it's going to work there in North Dakota. I think we can maybe look at, maybe 80% of the stuff I do here will work there. But then again, you get into a thing like, yes, is moving cows every day at high stock densities better for the land? We all agree. Yes, that is better. That's also a huge time commitment, and talking about doing it, 4 or 5 times a day. it's a huge time commitment. And on, when you're on a 20,000 or 7,000 or a 10,000 acre ranch and you've got multiple irons in the fire, you have to consider all those things. The situation can look a lot different if you're on 480 acres with 100 cows in Missouri. That's an entirely different story than trying to move your cows 5 times a day in, western Kansas or in southern North Dakota.
No, you're right. Well, and the principles are the same, but you have to adapt them to your operation. And,
Yeah.
That's a big thing. And people come, I've run into people and they go, well, yeah, that's great, but it won't work in my area, which is only 100 miles away from here. And I'm like, yeah, adapt it though. The principles are the same. You just have to adapt them to yours. What are your resources? What are your goals? All that stuff. And if you do all that, it all works.
Because guys are looking for that magic bullet, though. They're looking for the magic bullet, or they just want somebody to hand them a recipe card that they can follow. Do this in the spring. Do this, apply this fertilizer, use this seed, do this, harvest, crop, profit.
Well, it's what we said early on. We all look for black and white. Just give me the textbook answer. Tell me what page and number, I'll look it up. It says graze this many cows, that many days, and you have profitability and success. Hey, great. That's what I'll do.
Sounds really easy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way. It'd be nice if it would.
Yeah.
There's no grazing manual. There's no land restoration manual. Maybe we can say that, the start of some of that land restoration manual might be in holistic management, the framework of it's in there.
Right.
Nobody's written it yet.
Yeah. Well, because it's subjective. And it's like I was telling this reporter the other day. I mean, I can look like the greatest manager in the world, and Mother Nature will make me look like the biggest idiot in the world because she's constantly changing it up. And so you've got to constantly adapt and use your head. And part of our problem in the world today is we're taught to not think. We're taught to, again, textbook answers. And I know this because I struggled with it for a big chunk of my life because you forget how to think. And I think that's I really believe higher ed does a disservice that they don't somehow try to pull that together a bit, teach even if you never graze the cow, teach holistic management because it just teaches you how to think.
Without going completely off the rails here, the quote that comes
I'll
to
get
mind,
you there.
the quote
You
that comes
usually get me there, so I'm just returning the favor now, Ryan. See,
the quote that comes to mind is no government will ever give you the education necessary to overthrow it.
there you go.
That would be that's the thought that comes to mind talking about why don't they teach this stuff in college.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of truth.
So let's talk about your grass-fed operations and the bison. Like I'm interested, like cows are obvious. How did you guys do the bison?
You say bison and the next guy says buffalo. Now we can get an argument over that right away. Even with my boys, and my daughter, she says, Dad, there is not a buffalo on this continent. And I'm like, did you tell the Indians that? Because every place I said, it's not Bison Bill, it's Buffalo Bill. And it's even the North Dakota Association is the North Dakota Buffalo Association. So, I laugh about it all. And so I tend to like the historical, so I tend to call them buffalo more. And so what I've kind of come to, when I'm talking about them on the range, they're buffalo. When I talk about them in the meat, now they're bison. So I just confuse everybody that way. But
okay,
you gotta have a little fun with all this craziness we go through. But well, I've always in the bison industry or buffalo industry, however we want to call it, it's been a bit like that. And you well know this. I mean, back when it was cool to be in it, and then everybody got in it, and a lot of folks took a bloodbath. But we didn't have, at that point in time, the markets weren't keeping up with the production. That's not the case now. Now we got into it my two boys, Jeremy, my oldest boy that runs the hunting operation, and Jace, the one that runs the cattle and the buffalo, and it was kind of fun because they were actually together on this, and it was because we had hunters that come here that wanted to hunt buffalo. And Jeremy said, "What do you think about getting into this? I think we can do some hunts on the side." And then Jace kind of thought, "I think we could." There's a niche again. It's a niche market of a lean protein product, and you go after the health side of it, and so that's why we got into it. And it started out, Jace had a really good friend that we kind of got into. We custom grazed a few for him, and then got some animals and grew and expanded, and it's expanded pretty rapidly. And the hunt part's been good. I mean, it's not going to pay the whole bill, and we're just to the point now where we've got quite a few on a forage diet, and we can't put them all in our meat business. We're growing, but we're not there yet. So we're selling some, and then we're running some through the plant up in New Rockford, the buffalo plant. We hauled a load down to Brush, Colorado. Right now, it's hard to get them into these plants. There's enough production going on, and well, it's no different in the beef business. We don't have very many smaller plants out there, and it's anybody that's in this business at all struggles. So that's why we got into it, I guess, or how we got into it. And they're a majestic animal. I just love, I can look at the cows out on the hills, and they're cool too. But when I drive by that buffalo herd out on the hills, I got to stop, snap a few pictures every time, because it's just, first, it takes you back to what it must have been like when Lewis and Clark or the settlers came here. And those, I mean, we've got quite a few buffalo, but nothing like it had to be just immaculate to see 300,000 or 400,000 head up on hills and stuff, so.
It would have been a sight to see. So
Yeah.
how many do you have? Do you have like a couple hundred?
Well, we've got 300 cows, and then we've got another 300 that we're feeding up on roughage here. So we've got quite a few now. So
okay. So I was just wondering if you had like enough that were in a herd that you could maybe make some observations about how the buffalo use forage versus how the cattle use forage.
yeah, and it's kind of interesting how well, first off, they handle weather so much better. It's fun, you just watch the cows and they're all huddled behind the trees. Those buffalo are standing out there on the tallest butte, just hunkered down, taking it, and of course what's good about them is you don't do anything with them, because you can't really. You're not going to pull a calf out of a buffalo. That wouldn't, unless you don't want to live long or whatever.
Yeah, that's probably a high stress occupation.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of goes with, and we've gotten to where we do less with the cattle than we used to, because it's the holistic approach. It's try to select so that you don't have to. And once you change calving and you're doing it at the right time of the year, you don't, I drug a lot of calves in February and March in a barn, and when I was young, thought it was fun. I don't think it's that fun, and I would never do that again. But yeah, the buffalo graze a little different. They're less selective, I would say. They'll eat more. And not that, we're not like Nebraska. We don't have cedar trees and all those things all over, but we do have some brush and things, and they will graze on stuff that way. We're not as intensive grazed on them as we are the cattle, and part of that is we just don't have our fencing. People always ask me, how do you keep them in? They'll stay in fine with a 3-wire fence if they've got feed and water and you're not putting pressure on them.
Yep.
Anything puts pressure on them, they're going to rip it down and be gone. So every new fence on that part of the ranch where they are, we put in 7-foot posts and 6 wires, and then it's really good. But we don't have it all that way, and so we're a little. You got to pay a little more attention, but they're not hard to work with. But if you get them in a corral and you're trying to wean the calves off or whatever, buffalo get excited and they get a little jumpy, and you really gotta learn to, you can't hoot and holler, and not, you shouldn't be doing that with cattle either, but a lot of people do. You don't do that with buffalo or you're gonna have a mess.
You've got to be a low stress stockman with bison.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you work cattle and bison in the same facility?
No, we've tried, but we, and that we're building up the facility. We've got some sorting pens that are 10 foot tall now with guardrail. Just when we bring them in, that we can hold them good. And, everything needs to just be taller because they'll test it. That's what they do. And so, some of the really good tubs, cattle tubs, you could probably get by on a smaller buffalo. You can. The bigger cows and the bigger bulls, they'll jump a 7 foot. I've seen them do it. So you need a little more, just a little better facility, and we're constantly improving that. We're not where we want to be on that yet, but we've got some stuff now so we can take care of most stuff. So
It seems like you have to have it 10 feet because they know they can clear 7 and maybe get hung up, but they know they can't clear 10. So they're going to look for that other escape.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I've never been around bison being worked or like even like a big bison roundup. One of Ted Turner's ranches is just 15 miles south of here.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I'm good friends with the managers. That'd be something to see. I took a tour of the 777 Bison Ranch. I think that was about a year and a half ago. Had him on the podcast a couple months ago. That's Mort's Espy from down there.
Yeah, I know him.
And we got to look at their facility and wow. I mean,
yeah, they got a nice facility.
It's nice. It's a lot of iron.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, the thing is, they really want to be in a herd. So when you're messing with them, sorting, they just want to be back with the herd, and they'll do whatever they can to try to get back with the herd. They're very instinctive herding animal, and I suppose, cows are, but we've kind of messed them up over years, and they're not as good as buffalo are. So
I'd agree with that observation about the cows. Mine stick together pretty well as a group.
yeah,
And I've had this group together for about a year, and I ran with some partner cows. So there's about say 60 in my 60 running cows in my group, plus the heifers and yearlings in the heifer development program. In heifer development program in air quotes. Like we could talk about that one later.
yeah.
But I commingled with some partner cows, and there was a lot of times where I'd see 2/3 of mine in a group with some of his, and they'd be off by themselves. And then there'd be another big group of the rest of his and the rest of mine off somewhere else. And since they've all left, he had to take his home. Mine are all sticking together. They're always in a group. And
Sure.
I started calving just a few days ago, and it's real easy to spot because they'll be all of them in one spot, and one of them about 50 yards away be like, yep, we got another baby right now.
Yeah, yep, you bet.
So tell us about your cows, Jerry. Tell us about the cow herd. What kind of cows do you guys run?
Well, it's an Angus based herd. We've been, I guess I can tell you a story because I don't know if you've ever heard it. Maybe you have when I've spoke, because everybody wants to know how did the ranch ever get named Blackleg Ranch? Because we know there's a cattle disease. It was my grandfather brought the first Angus cattle to southern North Dakota in around about 1930. And we were predominantly Hereford country in here, and they hated those black cattle. They were wilder than most, and it just they weren't red and white, and people hated them. And so
That's not what we do
I
around
remember
here.
What's that?
That's just not what we do around here. We have red cows here.
That's right, and they just didn't like them. And so the joke was they were them black-legged SOBs. And my grandfather was kind of a character. He did everything with an airplane and chased cattle with it, or checked them all, chased them, and so that made him even wilder. And so he decided to name it that because everybody said they were the black-legged SOBs. It became the Blackleg Ranch. And so I always thought growing up, I don't know if I like the name, and now, I mean, there's too much history in it. It's going to have to stay because it's a good story, and he named it, and so we better honor him with it. So
That's kind of catchy. Brand's good. You guys have a good logo.
yeah, yeah, it all kind of fits together now. But so anyway, that's where the black cows came from, and like most people, and our cows weren't super big, but you know this well. What's the graph for cow size in the United States? It's just on a
Big.
big go up, 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 up. And one day actually, there was a vet here, and he said to me, I just came from a place and we were weighing all the cows, and he said they were averaging 2,000 pounds. And he said, I said to the producer, can you show me your 1,000-pound calves? Because he said, we'd like to get 50% out of these cows. And he said he looked at the ground, and I'm not trying to run him down. That's not my point. I'm just trying to make a point about cow size, because he obviously didn't have any. And, and if you can make this all work in regenerative ag and trying to cut inputs on 2,000-pound cows, God bless you. I can't do it here. And so our cows were not near that, but we had to bring them down. I want about 1,100-pound cow because, see, our goal is to never feed a bale of hay in the Northern Plains to a cow. Now, that's a challenge because we get ugly weather, but that's what we try to do. And we grow a lot of cover crops to graze through the winter months. And when it all works right, it'll cut $200-300 off from our bill on a cow. That's huge as
Yeah.
you're trying to bring your profitability back and then bring the next generation back to an operation. So we actually went in and used some, it used to be low line, but now it's Aberdeen, because we wanted to bring them down quicker. And it did. And because of the grass finish side of it, those Aberdeen cattle generally finish a little better. And I don't care what breed you use to do it. It's just, you've got to find something. And for those of you that may not know what the Aberdeen was, it was basically developed in Australia. They just took the bigger Angus, sent them one way, and the smaller Angus, and sent them another way. And it became that breed. They're very, they're very efficient, got a lot of positive traits in them, and they're just smaller. And for us to bring the size down, it worked pretty good. Now, there was some that were too small. You kind of got to weed through all that. But it allowed us to get these cow size down. I wouldn't say we're all perfect yet. There's still a few cows that are still a little on the big side. But when we're trying to graze them in a winter scenario, when it's, here it can be 20 below and we're grazing cover crops and all that, we just can't do it with something. We got to put all these inputs in and all this feed in. It just kills us. And the biggest cost for guys in the Northern Plains, well, pretty much the whole cattle industry, but particularly the Northern Plains, is these winter feed costs. They kill you. And so anyway,
Fed feed cost and cow depreciation. That's like
exactly. So anyway, we can do to trim that, even if even say it's a terrible year and you can only take 2 or 3 months off, that's still a big savings. But we've grazed these cows on cover crops through 200-year snowfalls just fine. Make them dig for it. Now, it didn't all come at once, and so they do fine. But we've also had some years where we had problems. We had one year about 3 years ago. We had 75 inches, and it came all in 3 weeks. And we had 3 blizzards, and you couldn't drive across our place with a tractor. And that's the problem.
6 feet of snow.
Yeah, and
6 feet.
it was, yeah,
Okay.
and it was tough, and we lost some cattle, and it frustrates you, but in the big picture, it was still more profitable than the other way. And now what we do there is we don't bring them home anymore. We never bring them to the corral because most corrals on most ranches are in a drainage. And where does that end up? In our case, the Missouri River. We have a perception problem. And why are we allowing that to happen? Let's not let's give the consumer what he wants. Let's do a good job. And so we keep those cows out on the land. We take the hay out there because then the manure and the urine is building soil health for us, improving our cropland and then it's also these cover crops are a good food source for wildlife and it's improving our wildlife. It's a win-win. Our three goals in that whole scenario are bring that soil health back, get rid of those winter feed costs, and propagate the wildlife. And we've been fairly successful on all three of those. Now, you can't just, well, you can go sell all your haying equipment, but you need to buy some or do something because you got to have a backup plan. Remember where you live. You live in the Northern Plains. If it gets ugly, but we went from putting up 5,000-6,000 big round bales to putting up 1,000 or less. And for 4 or 5 years, they sat in the hay yard. The boys asked me, why have we got all that hay? I said, it's our insurance policy. Well, then we had a couple ugly years and we fed it all up. And I said, see, there it is. You have to have it for when you need it. And, but that's been a huge thing for us on bringing profitability back, getting rid of those winter feed costs. And when you do that, of course, if you're calving in February or March, it might not work as well because then you're catching them in a bad time you're going to be the third trimester when they're out there in the middle of that. So we moved to May and June, works really good. And it's just been
a lot of green grass in May and June.
Yeah, and just makes the whole system work. We've gotten rid of a whole lot of work for us, and there's a lot of days when, well, you don't have to start a tractor most of the time, and unless you got to push a little snow somewhere or around the water tank or whatever.
Now, those second and early third trimester cows are a lot easier to bring through the winter than a baby calf. Like the safest place for a calf in a snowstorm or one of those blizzards where you get 6 feet of snow is still in the calf warmer.
That's exactly right.
And I think it's kind of relevant. We're getting ready to shake off winter and come into spring in most of the country. And by the time this episode comes out, I think it will be spring. There was a friend of ours that caught a little bit of heat on social media for saying that if you're a rancher and you're out calving in January and February, don't be bragging about it. Like, you're not really a hero. Think about what you're really doing and why. Like, it makes a lot more sense to calve on green grass.
Yeah.
And then cue that, well, we do it this way because. It's always made so much more sense to calve on green grass. I'll admit I'm calving right now at the beginning of March. It's a little bit early. Got to back that back up. Like, going to be 1st of April next year for sure.
Yeah. Well, and you're also quite a bit different climate than we are. But you know this. I mean, there's lots of guys calving right now and they don't like it and they complain about it. And I'm like, well, why don't you change? But it's that we are so traditional in agriculture and the fear of change. I had the same thing. I changed I don't know, it's got to be 22, 23 years ago. When I changed, I changed because my dad had just passed away. My hired man had been with us for a number of years, had passed away. My boys were off in school, and I said, this isn't fun anymore. And if I don't change, I'm going to quit because I don't like it. And I went to because I'm a graduate of North Dakota State University. I went to head of animal science department there. And I said, will you send me all the research on calving, say June or May, June, summer, late spring, early summer calving. I got a half a page. There was nothing out there. And I'm like, why don't we even look at this stuff? But again, and I'm not trying to be critical of our research institutions, but again, we go down that traditional path and we just discount. Well, that would be dumb because you're going to have little calves. I get that, but they're alive. If your profitability went up, if your quality of life improved, and you'll have to market them a different way. You can't just probably pull them off the cow and sell them. That may not work, but take them to grass or sell them to go to grass, or put them in your meat program. There's 100, well, maybe not 100, but there's lots of good ways to do that. But we tend to have blinders on, do it the same way, do it the same way. And quite honestly, that's why we're not getting the young people back here, because they look at it and go, my friends from town don't do that. They don't have to work that hard and kill themselves. I guess I won't come back. And then here we are. Don't have any young people coming back. And what do we do with agriculture? I mean, we hope it stays in families' hands, but that could be a problem.
Yeah, that's like we're kind of like dancing around this whole succession planning can of worms again, which
Yeah.
It's a thing. And maybe talk a little bit about how your succession plan is working there on Blackleg, and how your three sons got back involved when they came back from college.
Right. Well, Jeremy was much like me in that, and he was the oldest, and the others always tell that he was the anointed one. It's first the oldest son, he's going to come back, take over the ranch. That's the way it is, and it's the way it was for me. And he went to North Dakota State just like his dad did. He came home, and then Jay, on the other hand, he's the middle boy. He went to Arizona State. They at the time it was supposedly the number one party school in the nation, but he said he went strictly for academics.
Yeah. Well, look, put a pin in that. We'll remember that number one party school when we talk about Jay again in a few minutes and what he's doing now.
Yeah, exactly. And I never dreamed he would come back, because he went to work for Anheuser-Busch, had it made in the corporate world. He was in the fast lane, never paid for anything, had a corporate credit card, very successful. And one day called home and said, I'm tired of the corporate world. I'm tired of the traffic, the people. I miss North Dakota, I miss the ranch. I want to come home. Our joke was, what the heck are you smoking? And so I never dreamed he'd come back, and yet, okay, now how do we fit another one in? And then Jace was the cowboy. He went to Montana State on a rodeo scholarship, and that was his dream, to come back, because he's the cowboy of the family. And so then all of a sudden, boom, we got three of them back here, and I'm like, wow, how do we make this all work? And you can't put this all on the backs of the cows. And then my daughter, who went to the University of Wyoming, and she really wanted to fit somehow, and she's not directly involved in the management or ownership, but she does help some. And so then you're like, holy smokes, and now as they get married, then you bring in, in-laws and outlaws, and how do they fit? Some are rural and some aren't, and some have, they don't understand it quite the same. And so we're going through this whole succession thing on this place. And, I say it a million times, I'm really excited to have all the kids back. They have so much passion, so much energy, but yet, let's face it, they're at a little different stage of life than I am. Their goals are a little bit different. And even between Jace, the youngest, and the other two, there's 10 years spread between him and them. He's at a different stage of life and has different goals than the other two, because he just barely got through the screwing around phase now. He's married and got a little boy, and really coming along. But, and so we talked a lot in that succession school about family dynamics, and it overwhelms me at times, is trying to pull this all together. And we have so many opportunities, because everybody has some really good qualities that can take us forward. But you tend, in families, a lot of times you can tear each other down in a heartbeat, just because because you're families. And we're working on that. And that's part of what that school is about. And it's not simple, but we're determined we're not going to be one of those statistics that it didn't work.
And I guess that's kind of a vulnerability part. Like none of us that are going through succession events have it all figured out.
No.
Like I don't think anybody ever has it figured out, and there's always something left to be done. And I guess all we can do is really learn from those processes and try to pass that knowledge on.
Right. Well, it's probably I would say this, the biggest challenge I've had, you know, you got a 4-year degree in agriculture. That was never mentioned, and yet it's probably one of the biggest challenges in agriculture right now. I mean, you go through holistic school and all that, that never gets talked about. And yet we can have all the biological and the grazing and all that right. And if you don't get that family dynamic right, the whole thing is going to fall apart. And so, but nobody wants to talk about, first off, it's not easy to talk about. And I just had this conversation. Why I was late. I was in a meeting in town. We were talking about some of this partnering that's going on with the Grazing Coalition on this whole thing. First off, it's not easy to talk about, oh, someday I'm going to croak. That when you think about it and you go, God, I don't really like that. And then you start talking about how you're going to, make sure this legacy continues on and everybody's got a little different picture of that. And so how do you massage all that? And I'm learning a lot through the course of, because we're working on this and we brought in professional folks to help us because sometimes a mediator at the table keeps the conversation going right, turns the negative into a positive. It's been really helpful for us. And I learned a lot even about myself, and it don't come easy though. There's times when you get a tear in your eye because there's some emotional stuff that gets brought out. And there's just no easy way around it. But agriculture is doing a terrible disservice to itself by not facing this. And Starry Bank, I'm proud of what their partnership. They've seen this. I've not seen that from most financial institutions to take that forward and say, hey guys, this is a real issue. And I threw that statistic out there that day. I'm not sure I can recall it, but it's something like 70% of the land in the United States is going to turn over within 2 decades. That's a whole lot of land going to change hands here because a lot of us are getting older. And what are we going to do about it? And if we don't get this right, it's not going to be in families' hands. It's going to be in the investor hands. I don't think that's what we want. I don't think the consumer is going to want that either for agriculture. It's not going to help the food price.
Uh, well, you say you don't think the consumer will want that, and I would probably agree and disagree with that. I would
You
think the
might be right.
consumer doesn't know what they want. I would say that the consumer wants to believe the line of bullshit they've been fed for the spoon
Right.
fed.
No,
And
you're right. And that's part of our challenge. And you know this well, Brian. We run an agritourism operation here. And why did we get into that? Trying to tell a positive story on agriculture. In our little way, we get a lot of people here, and it's to tell them, here's what we do. We try to improve our natural or regenerate our natural resources. We try to put a really good, wholesome product on your table that's not filled with whole lots of stuff that you don't know what it is. And we can source verify it, and I'll put my name on it, I'll stand behind it. And we just haven't done that very well in ag. And we're doing our small little part, and lots of people are. But there's a big part of agriculture that's out there saying, hey, I'm smarter than you. I'll do it the way I want. And you're going to like it, and I don't think that's going to sell.
I agree. I think we have to do a better job of meeting people where they are and
Yeah.
where they are in their journey, on regenerative ag or wherever they are in their own personal health journey. We've got to do a better job of meeting people where they're at and
Yeah.
sharing maybe some relevant experiences what happened what we were doing when we were in their shoes.
Yeah.
I I think on some level, you know, some parts of our industry we need to shine a light in some of the dark corners and some things that are going on in the industry. Things not that you and I are a part of, but just practices that are kind of commonly accepted.
Right.
I think the American customer deserves to have their food grown by people like you and I that are willing to stand behind it, that are willing to put our name on it and say, this is my story, and I wanted to grow this healthy, beautiful food to nourish your body, and I stand behind that. You
I
don't,
agree with that.
and I don't think that any of the big meat packers would do that. I don't think any of their big feedlots would want to do that. I don't think any of the big, feedlots would want you going around touring and asking questions like, "Oh, what's that big 15-acre pond down there at the bottom of the hill? What do you guys do with that stuff?"
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about a lot of, some of the laws that got passed in the last 20 years, like the ag gag laws and the freedom to farm act, the freedom to farm laws and the rights to farm. Yeah, they're sold as a good thing, but what are they really protecting? They're not protecting guys like you or me. They're protecting these huge corporate interests that want to be able to engage in these, let's just say, questionable practices that are, questionable rather from an animal health point of view or an ecological point of view or an environmental point of view. They don't want these things to come to light. And when some of them do, they'll just say, well, that's just how we have to do business. Or, well,
Right.
we get that from another supplier, so that's somebody else's problem.
Right.
Like the feedlot operator is not responsible for all the soil degradation and erosion because of the corn and the feed that had to be grown to feed the cows in the feedlot. That's not his problem. The farmer's not responsible for it because he's just doing the best that he knows how, and he didn't know it was happening. It's like at some point we got to quit passing this buck around and take responsibility for the food that we're growing and the manner in which we're growing it.
I agree. And there's bad apples everywhere. And I think the quicker we just admit that and come head on to the consumer, because the consumer is very confused right now over a lot of stuff. And I know this from the ones that come here, and they will tell me, where I'm from, they come from a big city or whatever. The perception of agriculture, they say, is terrible. And yet they spend a few days here and they're like, wow, I've been told you guys, you ruin the waterways, you poison the air, you beat your animals, you don't care. And what we see is you live and breathe trying to regenerate these natural resources. You care about that water. You make sure your cattle aren't standing out in the middle of that creek that goes in the Missouri River every day. You know, you're worried about all this stuff and trying to do a good job. And then they challenge me, you've got to tell the story because people aren't hearing it enough. And so I always take that challenge seriously in our own small way to tell people, hey, we're trying really hard. We're not farming right up next to the creek and making sure nitrates are flowing down into that creek. I mean, we can clean this up without doing much different. It's just little things to improve that image, and then the consumer will be behind us. We need them behind us because otherwise we're going to get in. And this same guy that I'm telling the story on said, otherwise you're going to get regulated out of business. And that's true.
100%.
We saw that with waters of the U.S. and that, we could list 100 different things. Again, it's somebody sitting behind a desk doesn't really understand it. Here's these bad stories. Well, here we'll do this. They'll learn. We'll fix it. So I think we all got to do a better job, and that's why guys like you in a podcast. Hopefully, that's getting out to people, and they hear this stuff and they go, "Wow, there's some good things out there." So I commend you for what you do.
Well, thanks. Thanks. I know I at least have 5 listeners. Uh, yeah, I mean, getting the word out, spreading the word about what we do, giving tours, it almost seems like we're trying to drain the ocean with a red Solo cup.
A little bit, right?
I think about that there's 330 million people living in this country. The biggest podcast right now is Joe Rogan, and he's probably getting between 11 and 12 million downloads per episode. I'm not even a fraction of a percent of that. Don't even want to
Right.
talk about it. But he's only reaching 3%. Like, there's just an incredible amount of people in the world. It's just the incredible amount of people that don't understand. It's almost a generational problem. It's almost like
Right.
we have to go into the schools and start teaching the children about what food is and where it comes from in
Right.
order to really change the momentum.
No, you're exactly right. Well, even in North Dakota, one of the most rural states, maybe the most rural state in the nation, and yet you can go in to Bismarck, which is only what 60, 70,000 people, and a lot of kids couldn't tell you, well, food comes from Walmart or wherever it is. How quick we became removed from the farm and ranch.
And you kind of saw that happen in your younger days, didn't you?
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, well, back when I was in grade school or whatever, there was a lot of the kids still rural kids, or at least their grandparents were, so they visited a farm or ranch on a regular occasion. Now that's not the case. And the challenge in that is it's harder to get into schools. They don't even want, they used to like to have those kinds of things brought in so kids could learn. They're really touchy on that. I used to run the pro rodeo in Mandan. We used to go into the schools, Bismarck, Mandan, before the rodeo, and we'd bring the clown, and we'd bring a bareback rig in, and a rope and different stuff, and we'd show what is the spur really like, and how are the animals treated, and feel the flank strap. It's not hurting them, and you'd have a lot of fun, but you'd educate them on on how the animals are treated. And the last year that I was doing that, schools now we can't allow outsiders to come in to talk about that, even in a rural area like Bismarck, Mandan, North Dakota. I mean, there were some of the smaller schools, but the bigger schools wouldn't let you in anymore. And I'm like, gosh, these kids, they love this stuff and they're yearning for. And then we'd give free rodeo tickets to all the kids that came in and stuff. It was fun and the kids loved it. And yet we don't want them to learn anything anymore. We just, unless it's something goofy. I don't get it.
Sounds like I have this picture in my head of some new administrator somewhere in that system was like, a vegetarian or a vegan, saw that you were doing that and was like, oh no, we can't have this
Yeah.
anymore. That has to stop.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
all
and
it,
you're probably exactly right. I mean, it's that wacko side of the world now that just doesn't want to hear anything. We used to pride ourselves on both sides of the story, and then you make up your mind, and now we've kind of let that slip away on us.
yeah, yeah. And so how do we get back to where we're telling a more regenerative side of the story versus what everybody thinks they know about their food and about how bad us big ranchers and farmers are for the land?
You're right. Well, that's a good question, and I think when we tell that, I think it sells. Like people get excited, they feel good about it. It's this whole generation. I think something good came out of the pandemic in that there's a whole lot of young people that want to connect with where their food comes from and they want to be healthier. We've learned that the American people aren't very healthy. A lot of, and I'm not trying to be critical, but got a lot of obesity in the world and that didn't help us through a pandemic. And there's a lot of folks that want to, if Brian Alexander's raising beef and they think you're doing a good job, they're willing to pay a little more and they want to come out to your place. They want to see you and talk to you and feel your passion. And that's a growing segment. And we have got to go down that path and tell that story more. If it's through a podcast, if it's, I just came from this meeting in Bismarck with the Natural Resources Trust, and we're talking about trying to bring in some, we did some health people that are really knowledgeable on the benefits of grass finished beef in a healthy diet. And I had people come up to me, and it was for producers, but I had people come up to me afterwards and say, will you bring them back and do it for consumers? And my question in this meeting was, how do we get the consumers there? I'm all for doing it. Needs to be done. I mean, only in our little small way, but hopefully make a difference. But how do we convince those consumers this is important? And we talked about, if we did it on this ranch and we did it in our facility and we had this health discussion, and maybe we even bus them out here from Bismarck. We find sponsors and we're able to do that. And we give them lunch with grass finished beef and a beer off our brewery, that sort of thing. But then we take them out into the grassland and you tell them the benefit of that grassland to our old ecosystem, and most people love wildlife and all. I think we could really tie this together. I mean, it excites me to do that, but I got to make sure if we're going to do it, somehow we get people there, and that's the $1 million question. So
Getting the consumer to come out for ranch tours and show them what the environment is like and how we, how guys like you and I interact with the land and the cattle on a daily basis. We're only going to ever get an incredibly small fraction of that in person on the ranch. And this podcast is growing. There's other great podcasts out there that I could mention. There's tons of good guys doing all kinds of great regenerative things all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, on Twitter, whatever your social media drug of choice is, it's out there, but it just seems like I'm not going to say it seems like an echo chamber, because we are reaching, as a group, I think we're reaching new people and growing the audience, but it still seems like it's such a small number versus the 300 odd million people.
No, I know. Well, it's my frustration every day. It's just like, and this, when you drive down the road and you see vast pastures and there's no fences anywhere, and you're like, they're just season long grazing yet. And all that you've done and I've done and lots of other people have done and all the programs, it seems like people should embrace it more. But again, part of it's we're victims of habit, and so to break that tradition and to change is really a struggle for not only producers but consumers as well. But it's one of our biggest challenges is, how do we get this message out? Because there's a million groups out there trying to take the cow off the land, and they think that will improve things. And you well know, if you remove the animals from the land, you will desertify the land. We will eventually all go hungry and we'll shoot each other over food. I mean, that's just what'll happen. That's Savory's belief since day one, and he's right. It's the ruminant on the rangeland that made the rangeland what it is. And if some folks think, oh, that you take them off and all this wildlife will flourish, that's not true. And I don't know, they need to figure that out, I guess. But and we try to show them every time we can, but it's not simple.
If it was simple and easy, everybody'd be doing it, Jerry. I think that's why.
Yeah,
I think that's why there's just a few of us. So
yeah,
so you got your three boys back. You got Jeremy doing the hunting and a lot of the, what'd you say it? Agro ecotourism?
That's kind of, well, when Jay came back, we already had the lodges. We got a Grand Lodge, which was original after the sod house was kind of original ranch house, was actually a Sears and Roebuck kit house. Came into the ranch on the railroad, which is a little ghost town now. It's Britain, North Dakota. It's where my grandfather and grandmother met, or I guess I wouldn't be here. But Uh, so anyway, they turned that into our Grand Lodge. We have a liquor license and a commercial kitchen. And when Jay came back, we already had these lodges and the Grand Lodge. And he said, I think we have an opportunity to add agritourism and have folks here talk about ranching, have tours. And then what grew out of that was Western weddings. It's become a fairly big deal. And so that, where that all goes, but it's, again, we try to tell the positive story whenever we can. And then, of course, then the brewery grew out of that. We took a barn and converted it into a event center. And we can actually seat 450 people in there. And it's all rustic and really cool place. And then Jay, who had worked for Anheuser-Busch, always had this dream to do a microbrew. And so he put in this brewery, and so we sell our own beer at all our events, and it's in quite a few different establishments around the state. And he came out with the new Bison beer, which is in Fargo, and the 8-time national champion NDSU Bison. That's a big deal in Fargo. And so it's been interesting. I mean, there's a lot of work in brewing beer that I didn't know about. I just drank the stuff, didn't know anything about it. And so it takes a lot of time for Jay, but
I'm going to try to get Jay on pretty soon to talk about the brewery, but that because it sounds like a really neat operation you guys have going on there.
Yeah, well, and he's got a passion for it. He wants to prove he can do it, and it's a low margin deal, but it's been interesting. And then when Jace came back, he's the cowboy, and so I'm helping him transition into the cattle and the buffalo. And then we have our own grass finished label for both beef and bison, and him and his wife Cassie are growing that, and it's been interesting. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity in that. But as you well know, I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's a lot of work because it's hard to get dates in a plant and that sort of thing. And then you're dealing again with public and delivery and all those logistical things that we're learning, and been a educational curve, I think. But again, it gets us excited. It's fun. It adds excitement to the whole ranching operation. And we've stacked these enterprises, but they all kind of complement the main ranch. I don't ever foresee that we won't have cattle, buffalo or whatever here. But if you're going to bring the next generation back, first off, you can't stand in their way. And I had to learn that. It's not easy for a traditional guy like I was, big chunk of my life, to keep doing things the way you always did and not. But if you expect the next generation to come back, you better give them some room to grow. You can't do it all on cows or wheat or soybeans or whatever. Letting them have some outside ideas creates excitement, creates income, and you can have a lot of fun with it. So,
I mean, I'd love to have a brewery on my ranch. I don't drink, so I don't know why. It'd just be really cool to have one.
yeah.
One of the highlights from the trip to North Dakota was when we went to lunch. You, me, Jay, forget it. I can't remember the rest of the folks that were there. But the spot you took us to, like the first thing I noticed on the menu, go all the way down to the burgers. There's 3 Blackleg beef burgers and 2 Blackleg bison burgers. And then you start looking around and seeing Blackleg Brewery everywhere. And then here comes Jay, and he's like, hey, these are the 2 beers that we've got. Like, oh, cool. So you got a place to take people in town that you can eat your meat and your beer in town. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, it is cool, I think. And that place has been super good to us. And it's just kind of fun, and in that they've got both of them. And and most of us in ag and ranching, you don't have time and you don't do the greatest job of promotion. The one thing Jay's good at, because he did it for Anheuser-Busch, is that promotion and we need to let him run with this a little bit and cross promote across the different things we do. And if we do that and not, bicker over family issues, it'll really be positive for the whole operation.
So as Jace takes over more and more of the cow and bison, I'm sorry, buffalo.
You pick your words.
Oh, it doesn't matter what I say. Somebody will probably write in and tell me I said it wrong.
Yeah, I know.
So as Jace picks up more and more of that enterprise, what's next for Jerry? I mean, because
I told my wife
succession planning.
Convertible red Corvette, drag Main Street in Bismarck like I did when I was 18. She laughs at me. That would last about 2 spins, and then I'd go, "Oh, that was cool. Now what do I do?" Well, I'm not one that I'm not a big golfer. I got a lot of passion for this regenerative ag. I don't know if I can just not really looking to retire. I'd like to slow down a little bit, do a little more travel. You know me, I love speaking. It's not like I want to go on a speaking tour and speak every week, but when I can do a handful of them and meet some people and share my passion for regenerative ag and bringing the next generation back, I love that part. And so I'd like to continue to do that, see if I can move the needle a bit on regenerative ag through, I'm president of the North Dakota Grazing Lands Coalition. I love doing that. I don't, I'm at that stage of my life where I don't need more jobs and I won't take many, but something that really intrigues me, like the Grazing Coalition, because it's like-minded people like you and I that had struggles and saw they had to do something different and then embrace this and are pretty darn successful and so much happier and fun to be around. It's just fun to be around them because they're problem solvers, and it's that mentality that impresses me. And I love being around those kind of people.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, is there anything that you want to get off your chest that I forgot to ask you, Jerry?
That's a loaded question, Brian.
Always is.
Well, and I'd encourage you to have Jay or any of the boys on to visit about that. I think it's good for your listeners, young people looking. I guess one thing I'd say, because our operation's different in that we stack these enterprises. I I'm convinced every place out there has an unfair advantage, whatever that is. And you usually won't have any idea what it might be because you're too close to it. But ours ended up being, we've got an international airport 25 miles away, and a lot of these guests fly in here. I never thought anything about it, but that's a big deal to us. If we were 100 miles away from that airport, this might not work near as good. And I was on a panel with a Nebraska ranch, and and they had a river runs through the ranch, and they started this. They call it tanking, I think it is. And they put a tank in the river, drop it on one end, pick it up at the other end, and they are able to put these people in there, and they've gained quite an income stream off that thing. And I'm just like, you got to think out of the box a little bit, and then find ways to find what that unfair advantage is and go with it. So
I guess, yeah, floating down the river, tubing down the river. That's a thing. My river's not anywhere near deep enough to do that. Like, I have a creek wide enough you could just about jump over any day.
right. Yeah. Well, it's just funny how some people, but most people that are on a ranch would never think of that. And of course it's you're opening up to people and you've got to do things a little different. But if it generates an income stream that allows the next generation to come back, then maybe you should take a peek, so.
If somebody wants to pay to come out and sit out in the blind at 5 o'clock in the morning and look at lesser prairie chickens, I'll probably let them do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I've really enjoyed being with you, Brian. So,
Yep. Sorry, we've got to cut it a little bit short. We're running a little bit late today, and I have another thing to do later. But before we go, where can we find you on the internet, and how can people get in touch with you and find Blackleg Ranch?
well, you can go to blacklegranch.com and you can, it'll direct you to the meets or to the Rolling Plains Adventures is our hunting operation. It has its own website, but if you get to the ranch, you can direct. My email is jdone1882@gmail.com. If you got any questions or want to chat, just send me an email. So,
All right, good stuff. I'll make sure all that gets in the show notes.
all right. Well, you take care. Good seeing you, buddy.
Good to see you too, Jerry. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thanks, Sal. Bye.
And that'll wrap it up for Jerry. And now for part 2, we go to the brewmaster himself. Jay Doan, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me. Sorry, I kind of a busy day so far. So I just came from another appointment, but I'm glad I made it in time here.
Well, it's good to see you. So you're part of the Blackleg Ranch family. So tell us what part you are.
That's what they tell me anyhow. Yeah, no, so I run the agritourism and the brewery, as you see.
Well, not everybody gets to see the video. So
that's true. That's true.
You're in the brewery. So I guess we heard quite a bit about Blackleg Ranch from your dad. So let's hear about Jay. Let's hear about Jay growing up a little bit on the ranch and your story of how you came to brew beer.
All right. Well, it's hopefully not a boring story. Hopefully I don't bore your listeners. It's I was kind of the black sheep of the family. Traditional farming and ranching, and I don't know if my dad had told you this or anybody else, but it's usually one family member takes over, and that's traditional farming and ranching. I mean, there's a lot of times where nobody's interested in taking over the farm or ranch, but I have an older brother, Jeremy. He was taking it over. I was fine with it. Wasn't really even an option for me to even be involved. Never really talked about it. And so I said, see you later. There's bigger and better for me, obviously, right? In my own mind, the young 20-year-old, I can do way better than.
I remember what it was like being 20.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I could solve the world's problems. So yeah, I'm getting the hell out of here. So I, well, growing up in North Dakota, it's I'm biased. I absolutely loved it. I loved growing up in the country. My brother and I were extremely close, and we explored. I thought literally we owned half the state of North Dakota. Like we could do whatever we wanted, go wherever we wanted. I think we own half of a hospital from all the bumps and bruises and scars and broken bones. That's pretty normal. And we were always getting into, flipping a 4-wheeler or getting thrown off a horse and stepped on and
I remember some of that.
Yeah, but it's all part of it. It made us who we are today. Hopefully that's a good thing. But that was growing up in North Dakota. We were always involved in something. We were in 4-H. We were in speech and demonstration. We built things. We welded. And I bless my parents. They probably went a little overboard on our involvement. Like I was in flower arranging and cross stitch and photography. And I'm like, Mom, come on. Like seriously. I mean, looking back, we were forced to do this, but it was good. I appreciate it on every level of just how involved we were and how fortunate we were, I guess. So that was growing up in North Dakota. I mean, we did a lot of things, and it was a family operation, always a family event, a community driven. We've kind of lost sight of that a little bit with the community side. Everybody's, these days it's unfortunate. We're trying to bring that back, I guess, here on the ranch. If we can, maybe beer will help.
Yeah.
We've already seen it, I guess, a little bit. That kind of brings people together, which is nice.
Okay.
So that was growing up, being the black sheep, getting out of North Dakota, went to Arizona State for college, strictly for academic purposes. I don't know if you ever heard of Arizona State.
I have not, but it doesn't surprise me that there's one down there.
Yeah. I hear it's a party school. I never got involved, obviously.
Right.
No, I did a little bit. It was fun. I got accepted to their business school, which was a pretty prestigious, I guess, business school. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I was undeclared, was never going to come back. And so I said, all right, what else? What's out there? Worked for, after college, I actually became a financial planner, financial advisor, got securities licensed. So I got to figure out how money worked right out of college, which was fun. But wearing a suit, so first of all, living in Phoenix or Scottsdale, Tempe, I drove a stick shift truck, and no wonder people are fed up driving in 3-hour long transit, stuck in traffic. But for me, I was constantly just clutching the whole time, and I'm like, oh, how much more can I do this? It was miserable. So that was no fun. And then wearing a suit and tie in 118-degree weather just didn't fit
at all.
It was awful.
Yeah.
So I got in the beer industry. So after that, I worked for Senator John McCain's family there in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And they own one of the largest beer distributorships in the country.
Okay.
And that was a lot of fun. I absolutely loved the company. They did a tremendous job. Worked my way up relatively fast in that company, and I appreciate those guys so much. And I didn't want to leave. I got to work directly with Andrew McCain, which was John's son, who was our CFO at the time, and now he's the CEO or president, from my understanding. And then Anheuser-Busch recruited me, relocated me to Austin, Texas, and so that was cool. I mean, that was literally the beer business, and working for a Fortune 100 company kind of broadened my horizons.
And you're all on the numbers financial side, right?
Not necessarily. I don't see myself as a numbers guy. I think I see myself as a brand development marketing guy. That is what we have uncovered as we go through kind of some strategic planning from a ranching family base, looking at it as a business and our strengths. And so that's kind of my forte, I guess.
Okay. So Anheuser-Busch recruited you, moved you down to Texas. What was that like? I mean, you probably haven't enjoyed, some decently cold weather like they have every once in a while in North Dakota in a while, have you?
I had no intention of going to Austin at all, or Texas. Then it was Austin, which is not even Texas from what I've experienced. Yeah. And I've been all over in Texas now, and Austin is, it's keep Austin weird. That's a slogan.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, foodie wise, I love going to Austin to eat. Yeah.
Yeah. The food, California, the culture. Yeah, it is. And now it's like, since all these goofballs are coming from California, I can say that, right? Goofballs?
Yes, you can say that. Yeah.
They're Californians listening right now.
I'm a Californian, so you're good.
So you know what? Well, I'm glad you're listening.
Yeah.
We got one Californian.
No, we know it. We'll own it.
There's a couple out there, I think, that listen. Okay.
I was this close to moving to California, and I'm so glad I pivoted. I got offered a job. I was working. So we all grew up U.S. smokeless tobacco. So I went from one vice, Copenhagen and Skull, all through college, rodeos, NASCAR, spring breaks, It was unbelievable. It was fun. And then I got offered right after college, full-time job with them in Yorba Linda, California.
I like Yorba Linda though. Yorba Linda's cool. And because it's Orange County, it's not so bad.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a little more conservative anyways, but there's too many people. Yeah. Sorry.
There's too many people in Austin. There's too many people in Phoenix.
Absolutely.
I mean, people are just, multiplying like bunnies. I mean, it's crazy.
I'd argue there's just too many people in town, period. But that's.
Yeah. Wow. We got more cattle in North Dakota than we do people, and we're fine with that. I like that statistic. Excuse me. So Austin was cool. I mean, so a buddy of mine worked for the company, and I said, I don't want to leave the company I'm with. He said, we'll fly you out. You can interview. Literally, my interview was at like the Hyatt or Hilton, one of the two, over breakfast. After 2 straight days they rented boats, double-decker boats. We hit it was a live music, fun time over a weekend. And so I flew out on like a Friday, flew back on a Sunday afternoon, and interviewed 1 hour before my flight over breakfast, after having a hell of a good time. And I literally was sold. And I think there was some strategy there, because when they took me out in Austin, I was blown away at how fun it was. And honestly, how accepting. I had this image in my head, that I wasn't going to like Texas. One of my exes, I had an ex from Texas. And I guess they wrote a song about it.
Yep.
After the fact. Yeah. Anyhow, no, I just didn't want to go to Texas, and found out I actually really enjoyed Texas. So it was cool.
Okay. So then what?
Well, working for Anheuser-Busch was amazing. It was the good old boy company. The Bushes still ran it. So they invested back into their employees, and that was fun. And you felt good about it. He's in town. Sorry. Mama Bear just walked in.
It's okay.
Wait, what'd you ask?
So you're at Anheuser-Busch. They're investing,
Oh yeah,
investing back in your education. Like I'm trying to get to the point where you learn how to brew beer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Anheuser-Busch. Yeah, I was never going to build a brewery. It was never on my radar at all. I was a brand development guy, like in marketing. That's what I enjoyed. Sales and Anheuser-Busch. I had heard rumblings of a hostile takeover, publicly traded company.
Right.
The Bushes lost control. It is what it is. Shareholders accepted a dollar amount from InBev, which is a Belgian company, and yeah, so InBev bought them out, and I resigned prior to that because what I had heard I did not like, and I'm glad I did. The whole dynamic of that company changed, and honestly, I missed the Midwest. I missed where I grew up and the ranch, and so my older brother and I had been talking quite a bit. He had started the hunting outfit, diversified the ranch, and so I came back 2008 to really help grow that side of it, bring in guests and look at it more from a profitability standpoint. Like kind of when we started growing things, because we had funds now, and it wasn't overnight that happened. It took a long time, and so I commend my brother and thinking outside the fence a little bit. And everybody's got an unfair advantage somewhere. So for us, we're close. We're 20 minutes from an airport, the Bismarck Airport. We're we got a big land base, and so what was on that already? Well, you got wildlife, and so initially back in 2000 when he started, it was all right. You pay $100 and we point you over in that pasture field or whatever, and then they go hunt. And and that's it.
Right.
You didn't offer any other amenities. And so over the years, you take these old bunkhouses, old ranch houses, convert them. And so they were sitting dormant over the summer months. And so when I came back, I mean, we were doing everything. I mean, we were scrubbing toilets, we were guiding, we were cooking, we weren't afraid to do any of the work because we had to hustle because we didn't have, large amounts of money coming in, and we were pumping everything back in to the business. And that's what I try to kind of, the younger generation, and I'm going to say that like I'm so goddamn old. I turned 40 this month, by the way, in T-minus 12 days. I'm not looking forward to that, but 30 was hard for me. I think 40 is just probably another number. But
that's kind of what it felt like for me. It was just another number.
Yeah.
I've got 44 coming up this year.
Nice. And the Californian? We probably should. You're way younger than that, so we don't even have to go there. I just know you're way younger than that.
I'm in my 30s, so we're good.
Okay. All right. So what I was getting at is the younger generation, they, with all the social media and the influencers out there and, the YouTubers that are making, hand over fist millions of dollars immediately. Oh, you come out with this really, cool video or whatever it is, and all of a sudden overnight, boom, you got views, you got money rolling in or whatever it is. And I just hope, we need, people in the trade. We need people that actually like manual labor. And I get it, that these influencers, I'm sure it's a lot of work and editing and all that, whatever it is.
It's
and
not like going out and building fence.
Yeah, exactly. And you're not going to make $1 million building fence. And so that's probably why they're like, we're not going to do this. We're going to make some funny videos. The jackasses of the world, they're probably the first ones to be like, yeah, let's start throwing out some, ridiculous videos and start getting hits. And then a network picks you up and whatever. That's.
Well, I saw that's what happened with Anheuser-Busch, right? Like the family. Didn't they have a show?
Did they have a show?
They got a show, yeah, and I watched it. So yes,
What? I didn't know that. Well, I don't know if I would have watched. Was it good?
I thought it was super scripted, but I thought it was interesting. People with money, what's that like?
Oh God, yeah, and I don't know if people get bored with their life, if they're like, yeah, just follow me around with a camera because we got some notoriety and we think we deserve it, and I don't know, whatever. Yeah. If people want to watch that, yeah. Was it good?
It was good. I watched the whole season, so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I don't know if there's a second season, so I guess I didn't really retain for them.
Sure. Yeah, well, and I hope the younger generation, they have some realistic goals instead of just, trying to get likes or hits or views or whatever it is. And so, and I don't
there's no overnight successes.
Right.
No.
I don't think you should have a backup plan because you're ultimately setting yourself up to fail. Go after what you believe in.
And I don't think social media influencer is a very sustainable business model.
Probably not. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. That's a lot of pressure, to keep that engagement and content, rolling, I guess. So we got in, so I guess 2008 when I came back, we started remodeling the old Sears and Roebuck house, which was my great grandparents' house, built in the early 1900s. Cost $2,300 back in the day, and it took us 2.5 years. And so we did everything ourselves. It was a lot of work. So trying to navigate through running a business while remodeling, it was a lot. It took a toll, and we kept going. I don't think we've ever looked back, I guess. And so there's always a construction project going on, especially in the winter, where we pick up a couple over the summer. My brother's tearing out an old house now and remodeling it to use for guests, hunters, and But the ones at the headquarters are old bunkhouses converted, and they were sitting vacant over the summer. And so we had to say, all right, let's start filling these beds. What can we do? So we got in the international game, or the international market, I should say. It's kind of a 5-year process to get into international guests. And we've hosted all 50 states and 40 foreign countries to the ranch, but it's not easy. You got to do a lot of freebies up front. So you invite these, and you work with your Department of Commerce and Tourism. And so you get these operators that come from anywhere, Germany, Australia.
Like tour operators.
Tour operators, yeah. So they are essentially the ones that go back to their country and they sell experiences. And so now if they come to your ranch or your operation, they're going to want it for free. And I get it. So we've done a ton of those back in 2010 to 2014, I guess. And every one of them, they're like, yeah, we can sell this. We're going to take it back to our country. We can sell, your package. The problem with us or North Dakota is that we are the only all-inclusive guest ranch in North Dakota, and that's not a good thing. I wish there was 2. It'd be nice if there was 10.
Yeah.
We're a flyover state, and it's unfortunate. We're usually the 50th state that's being, visited. And a lot of times when people are like, all right, I'm ready to go to the Dakotas, which one do you think they're going to go to first? The one that has the faces on the side of that hill, right? Freaking South Dakota. Come on. That's all right. We're fine with it. We've accepted it.
Well, it's cold there like 9 months out of the year. The air hurts my face.
Easy. Yeah, it is. It could snow in June, middle of June or July. It's so unpredictable, but it can get 100 degrees, in the middle of summer. So no, I just think utilizing your assets, diversifying, whatever you have right now, and everybody's, like I said, everybody's got an unfair advantage somewhere. You just got to identify that. And so now that we have these lodges sitting vacant, now we're starting to fill them with traveling guests that want to, pay to play cowboy. We're not a dude ranch by any means.
Right.
We're not going to cater to you. We're not going to serve you afternoon tea after playing tennis or whatever it is. I mean, you're going to fit into our schedule. And it's a lot of babysitting. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And our horses are working horses. They're either old rodeo horses or ranch, horses. And so not any greenhorn can just jump on them. And so that's challenging at times, because a lot of people are like, yeah, I've been on a horse once at a circus or, a trail ride or whatever. And
I've seen one in person before.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true. I petted a horse, or I saw one in a book once. Anyhow, yeah, that's challenging. And so we've pivoted now. COVID played a factor in that. Liability is another factor. Headache, do we want to keep doing it? So
that probably shut down all the international business, didn't it?
Yeah, well, that too. Yeah. So we've kind of suspended that side of the operation for the foreseeable future as of right now.
Just the international tours?
Even domestic horseback riding in general. We've pivoted away from that. I mean, once you stop, kind of the trail horses, the horses that, you got to work with them all the time. And if you don't got people on them, well, then they start getting green. And then it's just, maybe it was godsend, to where we're like, all right, let's pump the brakes here and focus on something else. Maybe something a little bit more fun. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. My friends, the Hoys, they had they called theirs a dude ranch over in the Flint Hills called Flying W. Very similar. They kind of had a position where they needed to make extra income on the assets on the base that they had. Mm-hmm. So they converted a bunch of them to guest cabins and did the dude ranch lifestyle thing for, I think it was probably 15 years. And they were thinking about giving it up when COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it was just easy exit. No, it's for them. They said it was just a really, really easy exit to plan at that point.
Well, and sometimes you can look at it financially being like, yeah, you're making X amount of additional supplementary income, or you can just say, you know what, it's not worth the headache, and you just need that little extra push, and so I don't know, we're thinking about some things, just because we have the built up amenities, so it's easy to get into anything guest related if we wanted to. Now we still are. I mean, don't get me wrong, over the summer, I mean, we're booked out every weekend for weddings, corporate events. It's building the Copper Jewel barn. I mean, that's kind of our centerpiece, our crown jewel, I guess, on the ranch now that guests can appreciate and come to enjoy. And that's where the brewery is.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about this big barn. What's the history of this big barn?
Yeah, it's 13,000 square feet. Like it's so the original barn was built in the 50s by my great grandfather, and he built it out of cottonwood, which is horrible wood.
For every purpose.
Let's face, let's not kid ourselves. We're in North Dakota. There's not a lot of wood to begin with, and so you got to kind of use with what assets you have,
right?
Material, I guess, and so. So yeah, if we want to, all right, so 2012, we got into corporate events. 2013 was our first wedding. We did, and it was mine. Like, I got married in 2013 and I didn't want any, so this was more of a traditional thing. Before we opened the doors to weddings, I said it had to be a Doan, and just so happened I was engaged. And so I'm like, all right, it's gonna be my wedding then, first, and then floodgates can open, and they did. But for the first 2 years, we put up a tent, white panel, 40 by 80 white panel tent, and that sucked so bad. Just logistics. If you could put up a tent, and first of all, it's windier and shit in North Dakota a lot of times.
It's pretty windy down here too. I'm trying to imagine that today in 35-mile-an-hour wind.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's just it. So you got to erect the tent, build a dance floor if we're doing weddings, bring in the tables and chairs on a skid steer, ripping up the yard or the grass, hanging the lights, running the electrical, building, we're bringing in the bar. And then you could do that for 2 weeks back to back, but then you got to tear it down. Otherwise you kill the grass. And so it needs sunlight to grow. And so you're like, oh, this is miserable. Then you're storing it somewhere that's probably dusty, and then you got to clean everything off. So I did that for 2 years, and I said, no freaking way am I doing this again. And so this Quonset was sitting full of corn, and we didn't, and it's smack dab in the middle of our operation. Hindsight, I probably shouldn't have done it, but again, using what assets we had, it was a kind of a minimal barrier to entry then, getting into that. And so we cleared it out of corn. My dad actually didn't want me to have it. We fought on this a little bit. I don't know if he talked to you about it at all, but he's like, you're not having it.
He didn't mention that.
Okay, well, it happened, not physically, but verbally. He's like, you're not touching it. That's full of corn. I said, and we don't feed our cattle corn anymore. So why do we have it? We're feeding rats. And I'm not talking about these cute little tiny little baby rats. Like, they were freaking monsters. These rats were coming up underneath the concrete and just corn galore, like just a food utopia. And so I said, all right, so no more corn. I don't want to feed rats. 2, he's like, well, we use it for storage. I said, the old busted down corn grinder that we got in there, that we don't grind corn anymore, that we don't need. And so he's like, oh. So he didn't have anything. He's like, you're still not taking it. I said, all right. So I took it upon myself to climb up and start ripping 3 layers of shingles off that had been placed over and over, just over the years, just overlapping. And then it started to rain. I said, well, we got to get this corn out of here. It's going to start, rotting. He's like, all right, you can have it. And
I imagine he was a little upset that you tore the roof apart.
yeah, well, I needed to take drastic measures at that point because I needed a barn. I did not want to put up that tent anymore.
Right.
And so now it is. I mean, we started with this, what was it, 32 by 136 footprint, very long, not that wide of a Quonset barn. And I was fine with it. I think the first wedding we had in there was the end of 2014. And the bride like tripped on one of the broken pieces of concrete and stubbed her toe and it was bleeding. And I'm like, oh, what am I doing? But I was so glad not to put up the tent.
Yeah.
Right.
And we had old shop lights in there. I mean, it was very rustic and primitive. I mean, makeshift bar and whatever. So, but it was fun. That following spring, well, kind of into the winter, I pressure washed every square inch and there was an accumulation of corn dust, inch thick, all the way around this thing. It was pretty gross. Got rid of all the rats. And I was going to put this little bump out, a $10,000 little bump out on the far west end of this Quonset. So after you go 136 foot long, you would have went another 20 foot maybe long for bathrooms. And I'm like, man, Dad. So I give my dad credit. He's like, this thing is too long already. He's like, why don't you tee it off? So you take a building now that's this long,
Yeah.
and you tee that thing off from an aerial view. And I said, all right, I might be able to do this. So we opened it up 40 foot wide with an engineered beam and teed it off. And it was only supposed to be like a 20 by 20 or 40 by 40. That's what we started with. Then it went like 40 by 60. And now it's 84 by 104. And I ran out of room. I wish I would have built bigger. Like it's just well, this thing wasn't even a thought. And so obviously I took up some room, for the brewery, but
I think everybody says that about 2 years after they build a shop. I wish I would have built it bigger.
I know. Yeah, that's pretty typical.
Like how big of a shop should I build? The biggest one you can afford.
Yeah, that's just it. Well, yeah. Getting into so let me see here. The barn, so we teed it off. It is 6-inch like reinforced rebar throughout, because I said if these events do not work out, we are driving like semis through here. So I want it to be able to hold the weight just in case. And we still, we use this thing for agricultural use. Quite a bit. But it's been great. It's a great asset to have now. And we use it as a living classroom, outdoors, soil health, biology, indoors classrooms, different conferences or seminars or you name it. We've kind of done it all. And now the brewery. The brewery came out in 2018 is when we built that. And so I come from the beer background, and every brewer I talk to, they're like, whatever your budget is, your end budget, triple it. And I'm like, there's no way. Fresh of all, we're pretty, hands-on, like we're ranchers. We know how to build things and
right.
Make things work. No freaking way. I had to triple my god dang budget. And you want to talk about a money pit? This thing is an absolute money pit. And it's still going. Cripes, we're looking at getting into packaging now and a whole canning line, and it never ends. But it's great. We get to make beer, and that's fun. Breaks up the monotony and the redundancy of sitting in a tractor and or chasing cattle. And chasing cattle always goes smooth, right? They never get out. They always listen to you when you say, hey, we need you to go into that next pasture. There's greener grass over there. If you would just look ahead, they always listen to us. All we got to do is say one word and they're there, right?
Yeah.
No.
Hey, walk over that hill and go through that gate I opened earlier. You kind of touched on it. You spent a lot of time like in the beer business, but you didn't do any brewing, and you had the brewery in 2018. So did you try to brew your own beer first, like on a small setup, or did you just say, we're doing this?
Yeah, I went straight commercial. Most craft breweries, they start out, home brewing, like you said, small scale, gallon batches or 3 gallon or 5 gallon or whatever it is. And no, when I got serious about learning the chemistry, I read a lot of books. I shadowed quite a bit. I toured breweries. I still had a lot of connections in the brewing community. Even with Anheuser-Busch, Karbach in Houston, Four Peaks in Arizona. I mean, it was tremendous to have those resources available to me. And honestly, I felt like I was a sponge then, kind of just grabbing pieces here and there, if I could, rather than being a home brewer and my blinders on saying, all right, this is how I started, this is how I'm brewing. And then you start scaling up in your system. And then you're still blinders, I think. And you can't really do that. Sometimes you got to just be open. I don't know. And so now the brewing community is a pretty tight knit community. They are willing to lend a hand and just share advice wherever they can. And so I'm really appreciative of that, because I like to drink it. I didn't necessarily like to, I didn't know what the hell I was doing to start out with, but we wanted a quality product, and hopefully we have that now with 4 years under our belt, or 3.5.
I was sitting here thinking about the food police rules about, just getting beef to the plate. I can't even imagine some of the hoops you have to jump through with like alcoholic beverage control. Like, you definitely don't have to go into that. I was just I just wanted to make that observation that, it's probably not an easy thing to do or an easy bureaucratic process to work through.
No, it's not that enjoyable. In any quick Google search, working with the feds and TTB and
isn't there so isn't there like a note you have to like pay for before you even get your license? Like, you have to pay like a bond. It's like 50-60 grand or something. Is that right?
It's not that much. It depends on the size brewery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
maybe it's better for beer versus liquor, or
it's true though. There's how do you know that?
I watched the Moonshiner show. I'm like convinced if this world goes to hell, which is getting pretty dang close, I'm gonna be a moonshiner. So
good for you, right?
Yeah, I probably won't be good at it, but we'll try.
Not with that attitude. You got to be positive about it.
Yeah. But there's a lot of buy-in before you can even start production, right? Like, do you have a huge binder full of everything you had to do before you can get started selling?
It's insane layouts and approvals and permits, and there's a lot that you got to do, probably more than I thought I was going to do, more than I wanted to do, but you got to do it. And so once I had my mind set, I wasn't going back. It's one of those things, like, you're fully vested now, which, good or bad, you're married to the business regardless. And so you got to make go at it. One downfall, again, I could probably sell the equipment if I ever wanted to get out of it. Now, we're not looking to get out of it. We're looking at branding, and I look at the products that we come out with. There's definitely some traction on branding and brand identity and partnerships that we're really excited about. So, but still, this is smack dab in the middle of our operation. So nobody can just come in and be like, yeah, I want to buy this and we're going to operate right here. No, they'd have to buy it and then get it the hell out of here.
I see. So what are some of the things your dad leaves out when he tells the stories of the ranch?
So my dad's a good storyteller. He's probably one of the best. I mean, it's fun to listen to him. My uncle, so my dad's only sibling, was just up here just a few days ago, and I think he lives down in Kansas now, and so we don't get to see him a lot, but it's fun listening because he's 10 years older than my dad, and listening to his either perspective of the ranch, 100% different than my dad's perspective, and how each one of them was raised differently. And I mean, not that my dad's doesn't talk about those things. It's just a different time period. It's probably not as relevant than what we're currently going through, but I don't ever want to forget where we came from. And one of the most important, and this happens not just to our family, but a lot of families, is that you don't document the past or the history. I was not that involved or interested in history when my grandfather died. And that was probably the biggest tragedy that this ranch has ever had, because a lot of history and tradition died with him. And that was just, I mean, it sudden. So I know I'm getting off topic here.
Oh, that's fine.
I can't stress that enough. And people talk about, oh yeah, we got to write this down. And then they procrastinate, and then it's too late. And when it's too late, you'll never get that back. And we will never get back the knowledge and the information that my grandpa had of this ranch, period. So that's sad.
I would agree with that. And I was thinking about, a lot of the lost history that, we've lost in my area, some of the folks that have passed in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think about my dad, and I know for at least 20 years, he kept a day book, like not a full journal, just he'd go in and he'd write down some events of the day, things that happened. If we got rain, maybe an observation he had about the ranch or the cows or the forage that were on it at the time. I've literally never looked at any of them. And someday when he passes, like, I'm going to have a lot of that record and be able to go through it. And the point I'm trying to make, I think you hit on something. Like, what are we leaving behind for others to remember us by? What stories are there that we're going to lose if they're not told and if they're not written down? And I think it's important to commit some of those to pen and paper.
Yeah. Well, so one thing, I give my younger brother, who was born in the wrong century, mind you, he should have been born in the 1800s. He is very traditional. And my dad, so I give both of them credit for going around all the neighboring, well, probably not all of them, but a lot of them, neighboring farmers and ranchers in our area, and they have documented just the past. And nobody cares about that stuff. And now, I mean, they've done this over the last 10 years or so. Some of these guys are no longer with us. So for them to gain this knowledge and document it, like I'm grateful for. Who's done it in the past? Christ, I'm 13th generation in this country. We came over in 1629 from England.
Wow.
The Doan family, and we were a bunch of outlaws. I mean, if you ever get a chance, go to blacklegranch.com. There's a 17-page story of my family in the 1700s. We were a bunch of loyalists, which was not that uncommon. So we were spies for the British. There was a band of brothers, all Doans, which is my last name. So I think 5 brothers and a cousin. And they called them the Robin Hoods of their day, which this does not make sense to me, because they would steal from the rich, but very seldomly give back to the poor. So I don't know how they made that connection at all. It doesn't make sense. But
they the poor, is that what it was?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
but it's pretty interesting. So obviously it didn't work out too well for us back then. And George Washington lost one of his battles because of a Doan. And so there's really some really cool history, but yes, British lost. Good, I guess, but not good for my family. Most of them were, caught or shot or hung. And from my understanding, 2 escaped, thankfully, otherwise I wouldn't be here. Fled to Canada, and then after, things kind of were forgotten, from my understanding, is when my great-great-grandfather came down out of Canada.
That's usually where your dad starts is, great-great-grandfather came down out of Canada, and he leaves out that whole first couple hundred years. It's interesting to hear that.
I know. Yeah. Well, and that's still our history. Yeah, I get it. Like it's hard to fathom and just to wrap your head around, the 1600s, for God's sakes. Or the 1700s for that matter. There's just, that is it. So what I was getting at is there is a book this thick on the Doan family. Somebody wrote that down. Somebody documented that. And so we're so grateful for our forefathers or whoever to document that kind of thing, because if it wasn't for that, where the hell did we come from? I have no idea. It's just amazing that we have that.
I wish I knew more about some of my ancestors than I did. Like I really don't have that clear of an idea.
I don't either. Yeah.
Of when most of my people came to this continent. I wish I did. And it's,
we should hire someone, Brian, to trace our genealogy. I think they have people for that.
Yeah, I don't want to give them my DNA though.
Well, I don't think you can just give them the history unit. Does it have to be DNA?
No, probably not.
I know they do that on ancestry.com or something.
Yeah, that's like spitting in a cup, right?
I have no idea. I've never done it.
Yeah.
Ours is known, so that's all.
That is nice. That is really nice, and that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty badass, actually. You guys are the real Wild West.
Hopefully things have changed and we've mellowed out a bit, but I don't know if we have or not. I guess still some wild things that go on around this area.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the less wild things, maybe some of the agritourism stuff that you have going on the ranch. What kind of things are you showing off? And what's this tour? I guess what I'm asking is are these half-day workshops, 1-2 day tours? What are we talking about?
There's a lot of stuff. And if I repeat myself, catch me, because I was literally just interviewed an hour ago for some publication. And so a lot of this stuff kind of does get repeated. Yeah. So please stop me. We do. We're a living classroom, I guess, is how we showcase the ranch. We're pretty transparent. We bring in a lot of different groups on all walks of life. I think one thing that sets us apart from a lot of other traditional operations is that we will have a conversation with anyone. I don't care who you are. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I don't care if you're a freaking vegan or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care. I want to learn. Mm-hmm. If I just associated myself with, like-minded people, I will never better myself. Yeah, I might get along with you. What's that?
That's called an echo chamber.
Yeah, right? No, that's exactly right. And you get your little pep rally going and everybody just feels good at the end of it. Hell no. If this country and this world, all the problems were solved all day long. Yeah. Sit in the room and sing Kumbaya, whatever. There's a lot of problems going on. And so yes, we need to have challenging conversations and challenge each other. Even my own family. It's one of those things you have to challenge each other, and it's not always easy. And so what I'm getting at is we bring in all sorts of groups. We work with conservation groups. And I will throw I won't say their names, but there is a farm organization, rather large. How do I want to put this? So someone who heads up a farm organization, I was involved in a leadership group, and we had an organization, a representative from an organization that agriculture didn't align with. And I get it. If you send, so something that's completely like wanting to shut agriculture down, let's call them PETA, because it was.
Okay.
But I won't name the farm organization. So I get it. There's a higher agenda. And so they will strategically send a representative that knows.
Stakeholder, or
Say it again.
like as an opposing stakeholder to get that insight, or?
Well, so this individual was coming to speak to our group and to have an open dialogue. But they were told, so what they know is this.
Yeah.
So if you ask over here or over here, they're going to say, I'm sorry, I don't know any of that. I know this. Whether they do or not, that's all they speak at or speak to. And I get it. I can appreciate the strategy. That's fine. The person that is heading up this farm organization was at my table, and he sat with his back to this individual the whole time. And I'm like, I felt so embarrassed. I get it. I didn't agree with what this speaker was saying, their platform or whatever, but I will give you the respect, and we will have an open dialogue conversation. And this, so the farm organization, you need to have an open mind. Otherwise, I mean, you're going to be reactive instead of being proactive. And I've never forgotten that. I mean, it has stuck with me because I've had conversations after the fact with either some legislation that we've introduced or whatever that, and the dying farmer or rancher, and I say that cautiously, but it's a fact. They're getting older. Average age of farmer rancher is getting older. And the younger generation is not coming back. Statistically, it is a challenge. So how do we go around that? How do we fix it? How do we entice, the young generation? And so that's hopefully what we are. Think outside the fence, period. Right. Do not just and I don't care, as long as you're successful, whatever you're doing, great, then keep doing it. But if you're struggling, open up that mindset. Even if you are successful, open up your mindset. Diversify, look at things, differently, because that's how you're going to challenge yourself, mentally, physically, personally. So yeah, that's just one thing. I mean, just have these conversations with someone that probably doesn't think like you, I guess. So that's what we do. So we do a lot of seminars, a lot of conferences, a lot of one-day tours. We'll hit the fields, the pastures. So that's how it's kind of broken up. My dad, my younger brother will do a lot of that side of things, holistic, management on the cattle, on the rotational grazing, crop management, crop rotation, mob grazing. And then once they come to the barn or the headquarters here, then usually, my dad will still be speaking with them, because I'm sure, your podcast with him, was it like 10 hours? I would assume 10 or 11, somewhere in there. Did you get him did you have to mute him?
It was actually, here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to have the interview I did with him spliced in before this. So there's going to be like almost a 2.5 hour
gotcha.
Doan fan, Jay then Jerry, or
okay.
Jerry then Jay.
So this isn't live then?
No, we're not going out live.
Gotcha. I was wondering about that.
No, I do a minor amount of editing, and
that would have been good information to have, Brian. I literally thought we were live, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to watch, certain things I say and just be fluid and whatever. No, I'm glad this can be edited now. I can drop some F-bombs or whatever. I'm kidding. I'm not going
to edit those out.
Yeah, we don't edit those out.
Well, that's good to know. All right. Well, so then what I'm getting at, coming to the barn, I speak on you talk financials and numbers. I'm not, but I do look at things from a profitability standpoint. My older brother does as well. And so any business, if it's not cutting weight or cutting its own, we gotta axe it. But if it's complementing, okay, this brewery, for instance, the first couple of years were a challenge and we're like, what the hell are we doing? But it was complementing other businesses. So there's a need for that. Same, when you juggle marketing to sales, you spend a ton of money on marketing. Do you get that return?
That's always an interesting question, isn't it? Like, got this advertising and marketing budget, going to get the name out there, going to try to get brand recognition and people to, have that logo or that name or slogan fixed in their mind. So they'll come back later and buy your product. Like,
right.
That's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always a challenge. I remember when I was with US Smokeless, the sales guys hated us marketing guys. Hey, we were doing all the fun stuff and just blowing money left and right. But without that marketing, you're not going to have those sales. And without sales, you're not going to have the marketing budget. And so there's a fine line, I guess, and you got to complement each other.
Something that's been nagging on my mind since I was there and got to hang out with you and your dad and got to eat some Blackleg beef. Where do you get your ingredients from for your beer?
When did you have Blackleg beef? Oh, okay. When we were downtown.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. All right. So are you talking on the beer side?
Yeah. On the beer side, where do you source your ingredients from?
We try to use as much local ingredients as possible. So you can either say, all right, how do you get your recipes, or how do you get your ingredients, or what do you use, or whatever. So I'll touch on the ingredient side. One of our biggest selling points let me back up. Anheuser-Busch, everybody's got like a magic ingredient, right?
Right.
Anheuser-Busch, it's their yeast strain that they've been using for hundreds of years.
Coors, it's their Rocky Mountain water.
Exactly. So so for us, I grew up on well water, and I friggin' love the taste of well water. And when I built the brewery, I said, I don't give a flying shit if anybody likes it. I'm going to brew the beer that I want to brew with the water I want to brew with. Fingers crossed it tastes good. And and it did. There were some challenges because it is relatively raw, naturally filtered. You get all the minerals. Everything's in it. It is, granted, we have good well water, and it gets tested every 2 weeks. If we didn't have it, okay, I get it. You can't use, terrible water or unhealthy water. But to me, drinking just naturally filtered water is awesome, and it's good taste. That's a big selling point for us. And a lot of accounts, bars, and restaurants use that to their advantage as a local brewery, saying, you guys, this is what they do. This is their process. This is who they are, whatever. And it's worked out well for us. The majority of our grain bill, like 90% of it comes 20 minutes from here. Lincoln, North Dakota, they're called 2-track malting, local guys, local farmers, North Dakota farmers. And so they have a malting facility. And so, pricing, they might be a little more expensive than the big boys. We wanted to use local grain. So we use that. Hops is a different story. That's the spice of beer.
Can't probably grow hops in North Dakota.
You can.
Really?
Yeah. And actually, a lot of people do it. However, it's rather a new thing that's just turned on. And so we've tried some local farmers that, first of all, they can't produce enough that we need. And then the consistency, you know, I mean, you got to have, a few years under your belt before, you know, we invest a recipe around, you know, that raw material. And so, Yakima Valley, on the western coast, we use them. We get some hops out from Europe. It just depends what we're going after.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Water's our selling point, though, in my opinion.
How many?
I don't care. I mean, to us, not that it's a huge selling point, because branding is more the selling point than anything. You know, our bison beer that we got. I mean, it's a majestic, beautiful animal. Our tap handle is our 8-year-old bull, you know, sitting on top of the tap handle. And so it's branding. And so once we get into packaging now, that's going to just elevate the image and more brand awareness going forward.
Good stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with.
Me too.
Oh, you mentioned earlier before we got started that you had another appointment you had to get to. So where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, so, well, we're Blackleg Ranch on Facebook, Blackleg Ranch on Instagram, Blackleg Brewery on Facebook, Blackleg Brewery on Instagram. We got Blackleg Ranch Meats, Facebook and Instagram. You can kind of see the pattern here, Blackleg.
Yeah, I see it.
Website, blacklegranch.com. The hunting outfit's completely different. That's rollingplainsadventures.com.
I thought you were supposed to be the black sheep of the family.
I know, right? Yeah, well, you should get my brother on this. Okay, well, you should get you
have two more brothers. We've got 2 more Doan brothers to go through.
Good luck. One's on, well, they're both on a bachelor party right now. I don't even know where the hell they're at, but I was supposed to go. I actually had to stay and work. So I can't get a party like those two. Screw off all the time.
You had to stay home and make beer.
That's right. Somebody's got to do it, buddy.
All right. Good stuff. Well, Jay, we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
We'll see ya.